we have Johnny. They made decision to drop. I'm kind of having a hard time to understanding this. Made the decision to drop identifiers, and thinks they could harm less productive conversation. So, let's see. Hi, Johnny. How you doing?
Hi. Good.
So, what do you got for us?
It's kind of a hard. Yeah, it's kind of a hard topic to wrap your head around. But basically, this year I've decided to give up like identifiers because I realized that it kind of puts me into a like a win-lose, yes/no kind of thing in conversation where it's like it's not just like atheism and theism, but so I usually share way too much with people, and then they have a very solid idea of who I am, and then that kind of like gets in the way of productive conversations with people I know or people I don't know.
Before we get too far into it, could you do me a favor and define what you mean by identifiers? What are you talking about there?
You jumped on it just before I did. Thanks.
Like atheist or he, him, any kind of thing that identifies you, or like how you self-identify. I don't really self-identify. I never really have, and I've noticed, and this year I've just decided to stop, using everybody else's identifiers. It's hard for me to, identify myself.
I think I get the idea. I think I get the idea. Does it, and I don't want this to sound negative or anything, but does it, I'm really curious, does it stifle conversation at times? Do you have a hard time communicating without the identifiers?
Yeah. A little bit. It's like, my first language has always been numbers. So language has always been difficult for me, whether I have identifiers or not. So this kind of just is for like my own mental health, basically. It's a way for me to kind of cleanse the palate a bit. And
I totally understand that. I have a son who is on the autism spectrum, and he has a little problem with language as well, just forming the thoughts and all of that sort of stuff. He's high functioning. So I totally understand that. I assume that it's going to make conversations take longer because what you're talking about with these identifiers, to me, I would think of as categories or labels, and you're worried about being pigeonholed. And when that hole forms and you're stuffed into it can feel very constraining, and that's not exactly what I mean and all of that. So when somebody asks your opinion about something and you don't have time to explain, because I'm assuming you would need a lot of time rather than just saying, I'm an atheist, you need to say, well, I believe this, I don't believe this. And do you just avoid the conversation because you don't have enough time, or how do you handle that?
Just one conversation at a time, like step by step.
And how often does it come up for you?
Like, well, it's coming up right now, so it's always.
Good answer. Good answer. I had another question.
I find a lot like. Okay.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Please go ahead.
I was saying, like, I think coming from a large family or being around a lot of people, like, just listening to like several conversations at once, for me, a lot of other people get, I feel that like comforting in a way. Cause I usually have like I listen to a lot of like talk shows all at once and music, it's like jazz in my head kind of. So it helps me focus to have a lot of that stuff around, but I you know what I mean?
I do, actually. My son, I was talking about the way other people will listen to music, the way, you leave music on in the background and you don't notice it at some point. He will put on shows that he likes to watch over and over again, like the 1970s Muppet Show. He will leave that on, playing on a TV while he's working on a puzzle or something. And that script that's going through his head, because he's heard it a lot of times, is relaxing the same way as if I would listen to jazz, which I do enjoy listening to, or something like that. And sometimes he will have two on at the same time. time. And early on, my wife and I were like, wait a second, is this healthy? Is this something we should encourage? And we talked to his therapist and his psychiatrist, and they're like, yeah, it's just like the radio. It's helping him deal with relaxing or whatever it may be. So I totally get where you're coming from. How does the abandonment of labels, categories, identifiers, whatever you may want to call it, how does that help you? What does it do for you?
It allows me to communicate better with people without falling into the traps of normal conversation. Like if you go for an interview, that whole typical, like you're super confident at first, and by the time you get to the tail end of it, you're like, what the fuck did I say? You know what I mean? Like it helps me not get to that tail end, you know?
How do people react when they interact with you and you are avoiding the use of these categories or identifiers?
Most people don't really seem to notice because everybody's kind of in their own world. I mean, only my close friends and family kind of know what I'm going through, so it's not really. I don't know exactly how noticeable it is because I'm not in other people's heads, but I haven't seemed to like run into any major issues. But then again, this is still in January, so it's not like I have a ton of research evidence on it.
So
it's been helping me a lot.
What was your actual motivation? Was it so that people wouldn't have these prejudices about the label automatically? Was that the idea?
Well, it's kind of like a mix of like external and external pressures. Like I've always been colorblind. I think I'm on a couple different spectrums, but like I've always been colorblind in the past. I don't know, couple months I've been losing the rest of my sight. So that is probably, there's like one of the triggers. There's a bunch, but that's probably the easiest to explain to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And how about bringing it back to the topic we started with, atheism versus theism? Does that come into play at all? Do you get involved in those sorts of discussions? And if so, how do you handle them?
It's tricky, especially because when you see like the kind of work I do with like maintenance and I'm like an artist and musician and I'm a little bit of everything, but one of the things I've done is a maintenance supervisor, for instance. So it's tricky because when you start learning people and their motives, and then you start seeing the connections, because here in Maryland, for instance, like we have like the smallest like land mass, but we are like separated more than any other state. We have like so many districts, and you have like $100 million condos across the street from like boarded up homes. And it's just, that creates an environment of chaos. You know what I mean? And that's where I work all day. So I have to kind of like be able to go into these environments and survive. So I can't really just prejudge anybody. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So I have a little bit, yeah.
And I think I know what you're talking about. I did detect, I am also in Maryland, and I did detect a little bit of that Baltimore-ish accent with the homes and the Huns and all of that. So way to go. Mm-hmm. I hope you're going to enjoy some crabs at some point when it gets a little warmer. But I have, in fact, worked in those environments as well. I went to law school, University of Maryland, which is up in Baltimore. And as a clinic, we defended people who had no money as students. And you have to go in and not judge people, and you hope you go in with an open mind, and you want them to be represented and have an attorney that understands them. So you don't want to go in using labels per se. However, without some shortcuts and labels, it makes conversations really long. So I bet it's a constant challenge. I don't know about you, Kelley. Did you have any other sort of questions?
When you said that, I was just thinking, man, I mean, legal conversations would have to be a big challenge without using labels. That would be really tough. And I'm just kind of soaking this one in because it's a new one on me, and I find it kind of interesting. So, yeah, like I said, I think the being able to get rid of some of the prejudices that come with it, like a lot of people hear the word atheism and they jump right to these, like we had with talking to Jerry, you hate God, you just want to sin, that just because you said you were an atheist.
Right.
And I think getting rid of
even simpler
that
than
great.
that, right? Yeah, absolutely. Even simpler than that, where they're like, oh, so you insist that God doesn't exist. Well, no, there's some subtlety there. And if I just leave it as atheist, then then I leave it to them to define me rather than to me say, well, here's what I actually believe. And I've had that real time happen where you're talking to somebody, they bring it up and say, well, actually, you have a choice there during the conversation. I either lead with, I'm actually an atheist, and let them ask questions, or you start by saying, well, here's what I believe. And oftentimes I'll say, well, I'm not convinced that a God exists. I'm open to evidence. And if any is presented that's convincing, I will certainly change my mind. I just haven't been presented with any evidence that any of these gods I've been told about are actually real. And then I've had somebody literally say, oh, so you're not an atheist. So if you start from just tell you what I am or what I believe, you can end up with their dictionary is totally different than the next person's dictionary. So I think it's a luxury of time to be able to have that. You have to have these one-on-one conversations. You can't just get on, let's say, up in front of a class or meet somebody and just say, okay, let me tell you 20 minutes of what I believe. So sometimes as a shortcut, you'd have to use those labels and say, well, if I had to define myself, I'm an atheist, but if you got time, I'll tell you more about it.
Yeah,
I can see that.
So, well, I really want to thank you for calling, Johnny.
Absolutely.
Because it was it was really an interesting call. It's like I said, it's a new one on me. And it's going to give me a lot to think about over the next couple of days. So I appreciate it. So, and call us back. Tell us how it's been going with you and how things are working out with this whole new, this thing without using identifiers. Because I'm real curious. I want to know. So keep in touch with me, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Johnny. Appreciate it.
I'm a member now, so yep.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much.